My fellow friends and countrymen, our war memorials are under attack from hordes of people intent on destroying them. And it's important now that we stop that from happening. Please listen to this message from General Douglas Murray.
Well, we have a crux point in my view coming up in the UK on the 11th of November when there is Muslim groups, Palestinian groups, pro-Hamas groups in the UK have announced what they call a million-man march in this city on Remembrance Day, on Armistice Day, when they will again defile the cenotaph and the statues of our dead and our war leaders. And I believe that the British people will not take this lying down. I think that the police in the UK have failed by allowing people to march through our streets, past our monuments and holy places, past Westminster Abbey and much more, chanting Allahu Akbar and Jihad, Jihad, sorts of things. But clearly they've lost control of the streets. Now, is it time to send in the army at some point? Probably yes. But if the army will not be sent in, then the public will have to go in, and the public will have to sort this out themselves. And it'll be very, very brutal. It'll be very brutal because there is no the soul of England, the soul of Britain, is about to be trampled on very, very visibly by people who are gleeful in their trampling.
That was certainly an inspirational speech from Douglas, and it certainly indicates the seriousness of the problems that we're faced with. And now let us look at what happened on Saturday, the 11th of November 2023. Firstly, we will imagine that Douglas Murray was manning the barricades at the cenotaph, would we not? Well, in reality, Mr. Murray was posing for photos in Israel, clearly a heavily posed photo. There's a whole bunch of these, so we'll put him down as absent without leave from this campaign that he encouraged you all to get involved in. He himself was not there. Another main protagonist, of course, was Mr. Fox. So we can assume he was there at the front by the barricades, defending our precious monuments from the hordes. Well, actually, he was nowhere near the cenotaph on the 11th of November 2023, and he wrote in this tweet that he'd flown off somewhere else and he was actually in the middle of the ocean, and he helpfully told the journalists at Sky News that this is wrong, I'm not there at the cenotaph because I'm in the middle of the ocean. So Mr. Fox, who had spent weeks agitating the people, telling them that this was their sacred duty to defend the cenotaph, that Hamas supporters were going to be invading the capital, and that we must stand our ground on Saturday the 11th of November. In reality, he was absent without leave, not there at all. And interestingly, when I had a Twitter exchange with him about this, so the first thing he started off with is a smear, tinfoil hat, bonkers, down the rabbit hole, etc., etc., although he'd followed this account for quite some time and actually had plagiarized quite a bit of material from us. But then he went on to block our account, which is fine. But then he went on to insult afterwards, after the blocking, which is very, very cowardly, actually, and underhand. But more bizarrely of all was he smeared us for being grifters. You're always asking for help from Patreon and buy me a coffee, and look at you terrible grifters. Now, just as one little bit of interesting information, Mr. Fox's Reclaim Party has taken £2,849,935 in cash from one single multimillionaire donor called Jeremy Hosking. Now, if I'm a grifter with my $5 coffees or £5 coffees, I'm very much in a very junior league compared to Mr. Fox. So the smear at individuals trying to raise a few pounds here and there from Buy Me a Coffee as grifters compared to his party that, as far as we know, hasn't fielded really any candidates anywhere, has no national advertising, but has taken in the best part of £3 million from one single donor who effectively, in terms of financing, completely owns that party. It's a ridiculous accusation. We then look at another protagonist, Mr. Robinson. Now, Mr. Robinson got pretty close. I don't think he was there exactly at 11 a.m., but he was certainly in the area, and he was seen speeding off from Chinatown, surrounded by bodyguards, and also not intending to get into any melee. The melee, of course, that happened around about then, he was nowhere to be seen. So we'll certainly put him down as there or thereabouts, but not at least completely absent, as was Mr. Fox and Mr. Murray. Now, in one of the videos that we did earlier, we speculated, we stuck our necks out and said, look, these guys that are agitating you and me to go down to the cenotaph, they actually are pursuing multiple agendas. And I postulated then that first and foremost, they're not interested in excess immigration into the UK and having unassimilated migrants in the UK. That's what they claim to be interested in. But in reality, they're interested in a Zionist agenda in Gaza. And secondly, pushing a wider war, which is the war we discussed with Iran. Now, thankfully, I guess, Mr. Robinson produced a tweet which said exactly that. And amazingly, he put the items in that tweet in exactly the same order. Now, I'm saying here that I assume is the order of priority. Priority number one, free Gaza. Priority number two, free Iran. And then number three is free Britain, et cetera, et cetera, and detain and deport all terrorist supporters. Now, detain and deport all terrorist supporters is something everybody can get on board with. But what I'm keep trying to say is beware that you're being dragged into other agendas. I personally, and I don't think a lot of people have any interest in regime change in Iran. I mean, look at what we've already done in the Middle East over the last 20 years. You want to go into another regime change project? Look how they end. They end in enormous death, enormous loss of life, enormous costs, chaos. So I have no interest in that agenda. But that is Tommy Robinson's agenda. And the reason it's Tommy Robinson's agenda is because he is a Zionist. And Zionism effectively is a single state of Israel. That is the solution. And that really was a Likud policy in 1977. And it's a policy that Benjamin Netanyahu has announced. And I'm not sure Mr. Robinson would even deny being a Zionist. I think he's said that openly. And you can see that in a Guardian investigation from a few years ago. Now, the Guardian you can take with a pinch of salt, but I think they've put in quite a lot of facts and numbers in there. So I think there's quite a lot of truth to what's being said there. And also, you can see that in this old Twitter exchange. This is confirmation. I do think this is his agenda. And also, like all these other great patriots, he doesn't live in the UK. He's based in Tenerife, as far as I know. So just again, be aware, these guys have other agendas. So they're calling for you and I to go down the cenotaph while they may have other ideas. Now, importantly, the actual reports from the day of 11th of November 2023 from Talk TV, who surprisingly, I guess to some extent, told the truth, were very, very positive. This particular reporter was very positive about the march. And in the report, you can see in black and white here, no anti-Semitic chanting, no chanting of jihad. And if you watch the video, you can see some perfectly reasonable, peaceful demonstrators advocating for peace in the background. So all of those theatrical claims by Murray that they're coming to destroy the cenotaph and the police won't stop them and we must, brave men of England, get down there while I fly off and do something more interesting, was all a lie. And part of that lie is also to do with polling that we're not going to get into today. But these guys go out through the media, spread these stories that sort of the hordes are coming to destroy the cenotaph, and then they do a polling exercise. What do you think about this march? Of course, the polling comes back negative because people have been saturated with this message that is completely untrue. And that's something we can explore later because that's a very devious way of smearing protests and having them cancelled. And that's a whole different story. But it is part of the arsenal of what's going on with these operations. Um, and then, so what were people left with? The sort of the trouble, the provocateurs, Tice, Murray, Robinson, were left with trying to find individual people to say something stupid. Now, with 300,000 people, you're going to find someone who's going to say something stupid and offensive. And those people who say those things should be arrested under the existing laws and dealt with. Nobody defends that. But obviously, what they're trying to do is if they find one person, they smear the other 299,999. That's the point of what they're doing, is smearing. Now, I mean, even the people they found weren't really that offensive. A couple of stupid posters is all that they really got hold of. And what they ended up then clutching at straws was complaining about the chant from the river to the sea and how offensive it is. Now, that may well be true, but what I wanted to point out is from the river to the sea. Well, it's actually between the sea and Jordan, is the way it's written here, was actually Likud original party policy when the party was set up. So, are you going to complain that people are chanting Likud party policy? I think the answer is no. And I think the point of this is to say, look, there's two sides to this story. Nobody in their right minds would support Hamas, which is a terrorist organization. There's no question about that. But having said that, some of the thinking behind the Zionist sort of Likud movement also is not exactly a present. Let's put it that way. Um, and then, of course, people around the world want a ceasefire. This was a UN vote a week or so ago, or a couple of weeks ago now. That got no coverage at all in the UK, of course, because the UK is dominated, or at least a large section of our sort of alt-right media is dominated by these kind of Tice Murray provocateurs, and they won't cover, of course, the UN resolution where 120 countries called for a humanitarian truce. There was only 14 in the world against versus 124. So are they going to say that all these guys, every country here, all these billions of people are all Hamas supporters? It's totally ludicrous. And, that is what they're up to. They're smearing. So anybody on the sort of truth, freedom movement knows what that feels like. You raise a question about a vaccine or a lockdown in particular. You raise a question about lockdown, you want to kill Granny, which isn't true at all, but that's the way the smear works. So, people, I wasn't on that peace march. Probably would have been if I'd been around. But you have to remember that if you're on a peace march, you're not a Hamas supporter. If you're on a peace march, you're not an anti Semite. If you're on a peace march, you're not threatening British values. That's the smears that they use. They're not true. So, and then the other thing that we know about these gentlemen provocateurs is that we've seen what they did in 2020. And 2020 was the biggest Milgram experiment in human history. And I mean, you can look up what it was, but it was essentially people pretending to be government officials, getting people to torture another citizen because the government says so. And a lot of people failed that experiment in that they did torture their fellow citizens because someone in a lab coat who said, I'm from the government, is telling them to do it. And we saw that in real life in 2020. And that's a huge, important piece of information. How did people react to that government oppression? And in the case of Douglas Murray, he was absent without trace essentially during lockdown and the whole vaccine debate. Hardly anything heard from him. So he failed the Milgram experiment. Lawrence Fox, yes, he manned the barricades, he spoke out, he was there, so we can put a tick in for that. Richard Tice, not only did he not really speak out about it, but he actually facilitated the coercive vaccination program. He in a conversation with his deputy said they must be vaccinated, talking about the care home workers. That was their official position. 500,000 people have no right to proper informed consent, and they supported that. That is their true adherence to British values, not the flag waving, poppy waving, pomp and circumstance that you get on TV with them, but it's actually what they did at the time. Judge a man by his actions. His actions were to say 500,000 people should lose their right to informed consent. That's what he actually did. And that's his adherence and love of British values. So I put a cross on that box. Tommy Robinson's more difficult because he has a strange Twitter account which is unsearchable, which is a whole also different ball game. But I haven't really been able to find anything meaningful about his opposition to vaccine mandates or much about lockdown. I could be wrong about that. So if someone wants to write in and said, no, you've got that wrong, I'm happy to correct it. But the search I did, I couldn't find anything meaningful. So then we get to where are they on peace? So essentially, three of those four failed the Milgram experiment. So for me, that means you shouldn't listen to them again because this is their true commitment to British values. When British values, sort of limited government, personal liberty, were under attack, they did nothing. That's the reality. And I think it's very, very weak for a lot of people just to say, oh, they weren't awake or they were asleep or they woke up later and embrace them anyway and ignore what they did. I think that's very naive and you're wasting the information that's been given to you. You can see the truth in 2020 and you're just choosing to ignore that, pretend it didn't happen. So on peace, of course, Douglas Murray has been very provocative, again calling all of the peace protesters Hamas supporters, etc., etc. So my opinion is that he is an establishment provocateur. Lawrence Fox, because he was loud and outspoken about lockdowns and vaccines, but has been now involved in this inflammation of tensions now around Palestine. I put him down as a Judas goat who will sort of who will oppose certain items, but then when it really comes down to the crunch, when it's something important, he will fall into line and push the establishment position. Richard Tice, absolutely an establishment provocateur. Tommy Robinson, for the reasons I stated, also an establishment provocateur. And Richard Tice is an interesting one because, not only has he pushed the vaccine mandate, he was extremely outspoken during the Ukraine conflict, pushing for ever more escalation, ever harsher sanctions. And he started now again with this whole Palestine situation. And for me, I just look at this photo and I think anybody that believes this guy on the left is a serious challenge to the Conservative Party, who's actually going to go in there and fix things, I think is delusional. That's my personal opinion. But I'm afraid a lot of people are delusional about this, and they just buy the PR and buy the flag waving. But I think that's the wrong thing to do. So what are we looking at now? We're looking at exactly the same modus operandi as we had in the Ukraine conflict, the same faces, the same Hartley Brewers, Tices, all the rest of it, and of course this guy here leading the charge. The same sort of ludicrous logic that more war means a quicker peace. Ceasefires are dangerous. Their fight is our fight. This is an existential global conflict, and we must throw everything in and escalate it. So the same warmongering, and also all the time completely dismissing any discussion of peace, ceasefires, any other thing that stops human beings being killed. It's the same story all over again. I mean, there's almost no difference. And there's been a lot of theories, why are we going to war? War never makes any sense for anyone. And there's been all kinds of theories about gas fields and pipelines and canals and who knows what. I'm not getting into any of that stuff because I think we need to focus on issues at home. But I'll just leave up here, Just Merlo wrote the definitive analysis of totalitarian regimes and their psychology. And one of the things he noticed is they love during unrest in international politics, they are most at ease. The strategy of fear is one of their most valuable tactics. Now, we have been at war since 2020, war with a virus for a couple of years, war with Russia through a proxy war for a couple of years. Now we're at war with Hamas terrorists and with Iran and who knows who else. And all the time, of course, in the background, liberties are being taken away all the time. The whole digital agenda is moving forward, the whole restrictions to free speech, restrictions to association, net zero tyranny, all of that stuff's all going ahead now. At the end of the day, I don't really know what goes through these guys' minds who are in the political class, but this to me seems just like a reasonable background explanation that war and disturbances and fear is a good time to build a totalitarian system, which I think really is what they're doing, and they are doing it. There's no thinking about it. I was speculating in 2020. Now it's obvious by 2023 that's exactly what's going on. So this is my explanation. This whole conflict, endless conflict, escalating conflicts, avoiding peace, stopping ceasefires, it helps to build a totalitarian state. Now, just sort of finishing up, really, having said all of what I've just said, there are, of course, massive real problems, and nobody is denying that. What they do is they're utilizing those real problems to get you motivated in order to push their own agenda, which could be a Zionist agenda, it could be a Brzezinski kind of grand chessboard games with Iran. Those are their agendas, but they're using valid problems. Now, the uni-party, it's been a uni-party problem of mass immigration for 20 plus years. Massive problem. That's been linked, of course, with uni-party forever wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, getting involved in Libya, playing around on the edges of Syria, etc. That those wars have created the flows of immigration, and they've also radicalized Islam, because which normal Muslim would want to sit there and watch all these countries get bombed to smithereens? I mean, if I was a Muslim, I wouldn't be too happy right now, especially with over Iraq, but in fact over all of them. I mean, just look at Libya. I mean, it's a basket case. We turned it into a basket case. So that's had a major impact, and that's been a uniparty policy. And also the wokeification of the entire state that's been going on for decades. The whole common purpose training campaign has been going on for decades. It's a uniparty operation. There's no difference between left and right. The so-called right have done nothing to stop this kind of wokeification. And in the process, of course, loss of faith in the police. And that's something that Richard Tice and Douglas Murray have been encouraging. And Douglas Murray said it there very specifically. No, of course, the police can't cope. Now, this is now very dangerous talk, because you're really opening the door now to what these guys are doing, which is encouraging citizens to jump in and be have a go policemen. And that's I mean, you don't need to draw a picture of how dangerous that is. Now, again, there is a real problem, and that is in the wokeification of the police. But it's something the Uniparty has allowed to happen. And I throw all these provocateurs, I throw them into the Uniparty. I don't think they're looking for real solutions to any of these things. Because if you took a blank piece of paper and said, okay, the police, for example, I think are wokeified, what do? We don't go and tell citizens to go and arm themselves and be policemen. That's not the solution. No, the solution is use your platform, your enormous platforms, and your political contacts, media contacts to get common purpose out. For example, that's just off the top of my head. So, what these provocateurs are doing is not offering any solutions in any of these areas, really. They're just provoking more tension. And of course, the only difference between the left and right in the way that they're destroying the UK is that the left is going with intersectionality in order to divide people into, atomize them into little groups that then fight amongst themselves. And the difference is the right now is just stirring up racial hatred, with the same result that groups will fight amongst themselves. There's no difference in outcome. It's a just slight difference in methodology and political. I wouldn't call it philosophy, but just say methodology. But other than that, the problems that we're really facing, that we all know we're facing, are all uniparty problems. And I don't think any of your establishment provocateurs are actually looking for any solutions to any of these problems. Because if they did, if you took a blank piece of paper and said, okay, I'm going to fix whatever, any of these things, you would not do what these guys are doing. You would be doing something more constructive, working with grassroots organizations and doing this through the political sphere rather than what these guys are doing, which is, for example, encouraging citizens to become have-a-go policemen, which is totally outrageous. So the important thing to know is, and we know again from 2020, there are hundreds and thousands, millions of great people, and we saw them come out on the street in 2020 and 2021, who are investing their time for free, who are taking a stand, who are pushing against government overreach. You had all the people here, and then so many different organizations that were created: Heart, UK Medical Freedom Alliance, and I just so many, the yellow boards. I mean, I can't begin to name them all. And then you had, some leadership. You had Heritage Party standing up, and then even the guys that are not at the rallies. You had Peter Hitchens using his platform to push against this, Lord Sumption, Francis Horn, many others. But there's no sign of these Douglas Murray types. So we have allies and we are trying to fix real problems. But these provocateurs like Murray are not your friend because they were not there when it counted. As I said before, that was their real attitude to British values of sort of liberty, limited government, personal responsibility, personal autonomy. They did nothing to protect any of those things. So don't listen to them, essentially, is what I'm trying to say. And then just wrapping up, this is a series now. This is the fourth bit of work in the series. The first bit of work is an essay showing the sort of the grand chessboard, Brzezinski, Wolfowitz kind of overview of this whole conflict, which is always relevant. Every conflict in the world, you have to think back to what these neocon deep state people really want, and they are crazy. They don't care about life and death. They're playing these chess games. You and I and whole countries are expendable in those chess games. You just have to be aware of this is the way these guys think. So that's been set out in this essay. And I've had two videos above that. One is the impending violence, where we made a few projections about what might happen. And luckily, the violence was nowhere near as bad as we were worried about, which is great news. And that's a credit to the 300,000 people that were on the march. And it shows that despite the baiting, the hatred, the smearing from Murray, Tyson, all those guys, it didn't work. Just a handful of kind of yobos showed up who didn't really make any difference on the day on Saturday, the 11th. And the 300,000 marchers were essentially all peaceful, just like literally single digit numbers of people with a silly poster or saying something stupid. That's tremendously good news. And the provocateurs failed. They failed. And then the last bit of work we did is showing you the manipulation through social media, basically all of which is fake. And we discussed that with James Delingpole, but we found specific bots who amplify the Zionist message. And again, it just shows that you're being manipulated, and all this is about manipulation. So we provided the receipts in this video, and there's a little bit of background in there as well. So that's the whole series around this conflict. And again, I think the conflict is about a distraction. So we're not going to get into a canal versus a gas field, the Hamas, the good guys or the bad guys. I mean, Hamas are terrorists, let's make that clear. How much worse are they than Likud radicals? I mean, I don't want to get into any of that. We've done this bit to show the way that you're being manipulated and showing the provocation, showing the social media manipulation, showing the fact that all these smears were not true at the end of the day. That's what we're trying to show you through this video. And, to keep us working, please buy us a coffee. Would love to have the £3 million worth of coffee that Mr. Fox consumes through the Reclaim Party, but lower numbers are also perfectly acceptable. But this is more about showing a willingness to partake in this project. I'm not going to retire. I'm not going to be buying yachts from Buy Me a Coffee, but it shows willing, and it helps us almost motivationally to keep moving forward, because this stuff requires a lot of work. And you don't get much thanks for it. We're obviously treading on toes here that of people that won't particularly like what we have to say. So it's good to know that we've got some support, because without the support, this becomes a Don Quixote project fighting the windmill, and then we'll stop it at that point if it gets to that. So without the support, this is not it's no point in doing this. And Buy Me a Coffee allows you to do just the one-off donation, which is really easy. So hopefully that's something, because the Patreon is a regular funding, and not everybody wants to do that. So Buy Me a Coffee now has just been opened yesterday, so I'm hopeful people can just jump on there and support us through that. So thank you very much. And just the last thing I'd like to say is these kind of foreign policy issues are my area, and this is not part of the whole thinking coalition. So not everybody by any means has signed off on this. This is just me talking, and quite a few people that we cooperate with around the coalition may well disagree with this. So just be aware this is my personal opinion. Okay, thanks a lot. Bye. Stay free, do not stay safe.